Okay, a lot to get to here. Aidyn Chronicles came out about 8 months before the GameCube did in 2001. So, I mean, they stated, the developers stated that they weren't going to rush the game, um, and that the intended uh, timeline for its release was in March 2001, which is sort of when it was released. But it definitely feels incomplete. Like, it feels like it did get rushed. So that's unfortunate, but it's still got some charms to it. So at the start of the game, we learn about the character Aileron, who is being educated both in the ways of knighthood and as a wizard. He's an orphan squire who lives at the castle, so he's actually got it sort of made for an orphan, but he's missing at the time of the beginning of the game. We learn that he's been asked by like a local to investigate the disappearance of her husband Kendall. So Alarin goes into the forest alone to go looking for him without letting anybody know. So you get the picture of his being like very rash and impulsive, but also like good-hearted. Uh, Funnily, that's the only time, like in none of the dialogue will we ever actually see him seem good-hearted. There's a diplomat skill in the game that changes the dialogue and makes other characters react more positively towards you and give more information, right? And that's reflected. It changes the dialogue. So without that skill, Alaron is really brash and makes threats and is just generally mean to everyone. And we won't be getting that skill. So, like, NPCs will react angrily when they see you, and they'll constantly be making threats, and you're terrible to everyone. It doesn't affect the game, except in what's said, so, like, we just don't worry about it. So, Aileron's going to run into two friends immediately, and they're Mirari, which are like small green magic folk, and they're going to warn him to be careful. Then he's going to find Kendall's hat, which we won't pick up, but you can. But then he's immediately attacked by these goblin poisoners who, well, poison him. He wakes up in a strange hut where he's greeted by a woman called Oriana, who has nursed him back to health. And he goes, "Oh, you're the witch we all heard about." And she says she's not a witch, she's a healer. She's a bit absent minded and tends to forget things as soon as she's told them. But her heart seems to be at least in the right place, and she tells Alarin that she couldn't properly cure the poison, and that he needs to seek out more talented help, as otherwise he'll slowly die. And then Alaron collapses, and he has like a vision where he's confronted by these evil creatures, and he's told that they're friendly, and that eventually he's going to join them. And then the vision ends with this hideous monster, Pachangarat, who's the end boss. So Oriana sends Alarin back to Guernia, and she puts little lights out to follow home because the map is all loaded at once, and you can easily get lost, and you could wind up going anywhere, but you do wind up just following the lights. On the way home, we're gonna stop by an old abandoned town and grab the rope, which grants a +2 to the thief skill. And then we'll warp back by fleeing from the goblin that's patrolling. So in any non-scripted encounter, you can run away from the menu when it's your turn with the flee command, and it'll end the combat and it'll send you back a long way on the world map. We use that a couple times where there's backtracking to do to just warp back to where we want to be. It does anchor you if you win a combat or you have a cutscene or if you save and load the game. So in certain spots, we'll save and load to sort of create an anchor. So if we have to flee, it doesn't send us back too far. All right. In certain spots, we'll save and load to reset the positions of encounters as well. So, like if a wolf sees you, it'll start walking towards you, right? or if it hears you, it'll start walking towards you, but it doesn't start the fight yet. So if you save and load, the game will put the encounter back on the map, but it'll forget that the encounter has spotted you, and that's a way to sort of dodge some of them. So Abrakin's in a cutscene from earlier, but we sort of skip it. So when we get back to Guernia Castle, we properly meet Abrakin, who is the captain of the knights, and he's also like Alaron's personal mentor. And he's your basic gruff, grizzled veteran who's like too old for this shit. And then you see Sheridan, who's the king's son, and he's about the same age as Alaron, and they grew up training together. And Alaron will explain to Abrakin that he was attacked by goblins, that he's poisoned, and they'll resolve they have to go see the king. And you go in, you meet the king, and he's distressed that Alaron was in danger, and he's like really protective of him for some reason, foreshadowing, and he sends him immediately on a quest to Araman, which is the home of the Mirari, the little greenish people that you met before. And he gives him a letter to give to their king Zolan, asking him to cure the poison. The king promises that after this trip is complete, he's going to make Alaron a knight, which Abrakin objects to, but he doesn't think he's ready. But the king says it's his privilege to be generous. So Abrakin has to basically shut up and accept it. So you get to recruit people for your trip, and the king allows you 2 of 4 choices. But if you don't take the thief, then she's going to join anyway. So in reality, you're picking which of the other 3 you're leaving behind. We choose to leave behind Rada, who is your magical tutor. Um, Mostly, these characters are of limited use, given the way we handle most fights. But the most useless is going to be this Rada character. Anyway, in Great Guernia, you got actually a few things that you can do before you leave that we don't always do. The cook is going to give you some supplies. The master of arms, he's a man called Trahern. He'll give you weapons for all of your party members, and he'll also complain that he's like got a sword missing. And then there's Bowden. He's the kingdom's wizard. It's a real old guy who keeps like heavily implying that he wants to go on this quest with you, but you're not allowed to take him. Um, he will tell you that he was playing around though, and he was enchanting Trahern's sword, and he'll offer to give you a key to acquire it if you want. So we're gonna go do that. You can try to give it back to Trahern, but he'll tell you to keep it, and we don't bother that. So we are gonna grab Abrakan because he starts at level 8 and he's way stronger than all the other party members. He's basically the only one who starts out able to hit enemies with any kind of reliability. We're also taking Godric, who is insane. He's got a lot of really funny dialogue that's written that's references to modern sciences. So, for example, he's determined that all matter is made up of tiny particles that he calls modas, like atoms backwards. He's a decent wizard, but more importantly, he's an alchemist, and we could use his alchemy skill to make potions that we're going to use. He can also make restore potions, which sell at 1,000 some odd a pop. And the stuff that we use to make it is much cheaper, so we use him for infinite gold early. So last there's Brenna, who won't let you leave without her, and will never leave the party willingly at any time you try to get a new party member. She's a thief, and she grew up with Alarin, and there's this like implied love interest. Like she's always mentioning how she knows him better than anyone else, and how he needs her around so she can tell him when he's stupid, And whenever there's another female character that hits on Alaron or anything, she acts really jealous. But of course, they never address it directly. As a character, she's like decent, but unfortunately, she won't be like as a fighting character, she's decent, but unfortunately, she won't be acquiring enough XP in the run for her ever to be really useful in combat, except maybe in the first fight. So in the town of Guarnia, we're going to quickly use selling potions to gain all the money that we're going to need for the majority of the game. And then we'll have some strength potions, dexterity and defense potions that they're useful in pumping stats. And then it's time to just go to Araman. We're gonna stop on the way to find like this weird camp that was left by chaos enemies that we'll eventually encountering, and it's sort of more foreshadowing of what's to come. And that Alarin's being watched by some like dark and powerful forces. So generally, we try to avoid combat, especially early, because it's not worth very much experience. Game way the game works is you run into encounters on the world map, and it transports you to a combat map. After that combat is resolved, you're back on the world map. Early, we've got cloth armor, which gives a +5 to stealth, so we give that to Brenna, and we can sneak past most encounters. The encounters can see and hear you when you're not sneaking. So running means giving them like a wide berth, right? Which is an inefficient pathing, but it's typically faster. And when you have to get close, because of close quarters, you can try to sneak by. You can sneak past encounters. Sneaking is really slow, so we try to run past any of them that we can. On the way to Araman, the only fight we take is a wolf. Really, because it's in a narrow passageway. It's unreliable to sneak past him. If he randomly decides to turn towards you, then your stealth isn't enough to get by him, and you do have to fight him, which means you have to load a save. That loses more time. Like it's only one wolf. It's a lone wolf, so you can handle the encounter pretty quickly with Abrakan. So it's faster and easier just to take the fight. Actually, we also take a bad encounter in the woods because we'd otherwise run into it on the way back as well, and it's faster to kill it than to sneak past it twice. But other than that, we arrive at Araman. We should arrive without incident and largely without any other combats. So first thing we do in Araman is we acquire the Rich Ring. There's a chest that has some random contents, and it has a small chance to include some rare stuff. It could include a sapphire gem, or a wizard hat, or a rich witch ring. Or it's possible to contain multiples of that, but it's obviously very rare. The witch ring is the thing we want because it adds +2 to our wizard skill level, and that's going to be necessary later. There's a small chance for the witch ring to appear. Alright, so we just keep loading a save until it's there. I do this as soon as possible, and it's early enough in the run that if it takes 20 minutes or something, I can restart the run. Typically, it takes no more than like 5 to 8 minutes. Right? And then we go shopping. We're buying a couple dragon leather, which is not only the best armor for protection we can have right now, but it also adds +10 to stealth. Right? And most armor reduces your dexterity. This armor doesn't. So that's pretty useful. The highest level you can have in a skill, by the way, is 10. But skills actually cap at 15. So you can't max a skill without items. This leather armor, or this dragon leather, adding 10 to the stealth means that we're going to be pretty close to the cap, even if it was just at level 1. We're also grabbing a couple wands and scrolls. We're going to grab the light wand and the shielding wand on top of some debilitation and stupidity scrolls. We're going to grab the bardic gloves, and we're going to grab some Mirari cloaks for protection. We're going to grab some mercenary belts for protection. And there's Jundar gauntlets, which add damage. Anyway, we're going to grab all that, and then we're going to go talk to Zoman. We go to Zoman with this letter asking for help curing the poison, and Zoman sort of says, "Oh no, I want to help you, but we've got our own problems with these goblins that keep raiding us. If only someone could help with that. So, of course, you have to volunteer to handle the goblins. So we go off to kill their leader. Now, on the way up the mountain, we're going to encounter this ogre, and it's faster to fight it than to sneak by twice because you'd sneak up by one on the way up the mountain and one on the way down. So we use the stupidity scroll to kill it. So scrolls are items that you can use that if you use them out of combat, it'll attempt to learn the spell that's on the scroll. You can use them in combat though. You can equip them in combat and use them to cast the spell on the scroll level 5. And even people who aren't wizards can use them as items. So we use them on Abrakin because he has the highest dex, so he takes the most turns. And he's going to be able to use this scroll to cast Stupidity at level 5. Now, stupidity takes away 2 intelligence per level. So at level 5, it's going to take away 10 intelligence from the enemies. And this is the way we're going to kill most enemies. You properly kill them by dropping their HP to 0. But if all the enemies in combat are immobilized, then you have no way to lose the fight, so it just ends. So the Wall of Bones spell, that we'll pick up later, is one way to immobilize enemies, but another way is to stat kill them, which means you reduce their strength or their intelligence or their dexterity to 0. At that point, they're still alive, but they can take no actions. So ogres have an intelligence of 8. So stupidity reduces it 2 per level, so it's reducing it by 10. So the scrolls will be enough to immobilize them. Immobilized enemies stay on the screen, however, so they don't count as dead with regards to allowing reinforcements to enter the battle. Because like a fight can have up to 12 enemies, but only 4 of them are on the battlefield at once. The other 8 are reinforcements that can show up once a spot is opened after an enemy dies or flees. If you immobilize all the enemies on the map, but there are still reinforcements, you need to kill some with damage in order to make room for the reinforcements, because the battle doesn't end until all enemies are killed or immobilized. So we make our way back to Kitterak, which is a boss fight. At this point, we haven't spent any of our XP yet, so we're grossly underpowered for this fight. But none of that matters because we've got strength potions and dexterity potions. Both of them add plus 10 to the stat, right? Which is the equivalent of several levels. Higher dexterity means you not only hit more often, but also you take more turns. So we're going to use them first. Then we use a strength potion, which will allow Abrakin and Brenna to equip stronger weapons. And we're going to take a turn to equip these stronger weapons. Right, and then we're going to use a wand to cast a Starlight Shield, which provides a lot of protection, makes us really tanky. And we're going to cast Light with a wand as well. So what Light does is, Aidyn Chronicles characters are either solar or lunar aspect. Solar aspect characters are stronger during the day and weaker at night. They're more likely to hit with their attacks during the day, and those attacks will do more damage. At night, they'll generally miss their attacks. Or at least they're more likely to, and they're more likely to fail their spell casts, and they're just generally bad. They're at their strongest when the sun is at the peak in the sky, which you can see in the bottom left whenever you're on the world map. The light spell makes it so the sun's at the highest point for the battle, making solars as strong as possible for the fight, which is important since Aileron and Abrakin and Brenna are all solars. Alright, the darkness spell sets the sun to the lowest point, which makes solars as weak as possible. Now, Godric is a lunar character, so he doesn't care about the point of the sun. He cares how full the moon is. He's going to be really weak for this fight because the moon's a new moon. But we use him to cast the light from the light wand, and then we get him killed off by the hobgoblins because he's no longer useful. And his hilarious dialogue in cutscenes takes time. So Abrakin with the strength potion can hit Kitterak pretty hard, and Brenna does some damage when attacking from behind. All characters have improved accuracy when attacking the enemy from behind, but characters with the thief skill also do more damage from behind. Brenna's thief skill is at 3 plus 2 with the rope. So she'll do fair damage in this fight. Um, Godric's job is to die. Like, death is permanent for all characters. And obviously, if Alaron dies, it's game over. If Alaron lives, though, the game continues no matter who else is dead. So no one else is ever necessary. There was going to be like a revive mechanic with Sapphire Gems, but it was buggy, it didn't work. So they eliminated it before release, and Sapphires do nothing except sell for a lot. And anytime a character dies, they're done. Right? That's you're never going to bring them back. Kidorak has a really awesome sword that he leaves behind when he dies. It's magic, which is important because some enemies resist any non-magical weapons. It casts a life-draining spell called Tap Stamina whenever you attack, and it grants a +2 to your warrior skill, which is pretty strong. There's only one other sword that I can think of that does, and it's the endgame sword. You also can use the Warfang in combat to cast the darkness spell, but why would you ever do that? Anyway, after we kill Kidorak, it's back down the mountain to talk to Zoman, and Zoman immediately reneges on his deal. He never actually had the ability to cure your poison, so he just sort of let you believe that he did, so you'd go handle his goblin problem for him. But he does send you to the Magic University in Tollywalk. Before you leave, though, like when you leave someone's home, you like meet your Mirari friends, who will tell you to go consult two other Mirari friends, who will tell you to consult their sage Uraza. So you go do that, and she's going to give you a magic stick that advances the plot. It's called Stormbreaker. So we also activate a portal before we go. This game is long. It takes a while to move along the map. And the only way to make it any shorter is these two-way portals that exist in places. Portals only work if you've activated both of them. So we activate this one in preparation to use its counterpart in Guernia at the end of the game. And then we're off to Tollywalk. So on the way to Tollywalk, we're going to pick up a wizard hat, which gives +1 to wizard skill, along with a witch ring that adds your wizard level by 3, and that's going to come in handy after Tollywalk. So to get to the wizard hat, we're going to take two fights. One with this lone bear, which is easy enough to kill, but it's hard to sneak past. And we'd have to sneak past him twice. So then we take an ogre boss fight, which is again faster than sneaking, but also it's a decent fight for XP, and we'll handle it with stupidity scrolls. Then we're straight to Tollywalk, avoiding most of the encounters. We do take one bat encounter, and that's because it's an easy encounter to fight, and it covers a pretty large region. And instead of giving it, like if we were to give it a wide berth, it would mean running into wolves instead. So it sort of snowballs from there. It just becomes easier to take the bat encounter and just kill it. In order to get to the Tollywalk's mage's school, like in order to get in, the doorman is going to ask each character for their true name, and each party member is going to answer. Abrakan will say that he doesn't use magic, and therefore his true name is secret. Any other character that doesn't use magic, like Beacon, would also say their name is secret. Brenna can learn magic, so she'll state her true name. But Alaron doesn't have an answer. It's sort of funny. He'll say that his true name is Alaron, and the mage at the door will say that's a lie, which is interesting later. Much later, anyway. But Alaron says he doesn't know his true name, and the mage decides to let him in anyway. So you go to Ardra, who is the head wizard of the mage school, and she only agrees to see you because you have the stick that Uraza gave you. Ardra says she'll help you, but the ritual to cure the poison requires the amaranth flower from the woods behind the school. So she sends you to go get it. There are dryads who live in the forest, and the queen of the dryads, Pandera, she agrees to help you. Once you have the amaranth, the dryads will train you, and this is the first time that we're going to spend any XP. The XP system is what makes this an engaging game. After every combat, you can spend XP on any of your attributes to raise it, or a skill to increase it, or on a spell you know to level it. Right? You can learn new skills and spells from trainers, and there's a vast number of things that you can spend your experience on. And it feels a bit like being a kid in a candy store. It means casually, you don't really mind taking fights because the chance to spend your XP afterwards. All right, when you find a trainer, and you have to pay gold to be trained, but you can level up for 80% of the experience needed, which can add up a lot. Here in the forest, we're going to be teaching Brenna the troubadour skill, which allows her to perform in battle, which increases allies' chances to hit, and it reduces the enemy morale, which is important because it makes them run away more readily. So talking to Pandora with the Amaranth, we have to impress her. She insists that we woo her, which is a chance based on Alaron's troubadour skill. We were supposed to use the chance with the Dryad trainer to increase it, but it's sort of like diplomat. It's not a requirement. We can just keep talking to her until we succeed, and that triggers a cutscene where if we say the right things, she'll give us her amulet, which she says will allow us to summon her once. But it doesn't actually do anything, so it's faster if we offend her and then she'll fly off in a huff and we can just go back to Ardra. There is a scene where Brenna will be jealous because we had a beautiful Dryad queen hitting on us, and Alaron will tell him that Pandora said he's a wildling, which is someone who can cast all four schools of magic. Incidentally, in this world, there are four schools of magic. The human school is naming magic, which is mostly about buffs and debuffs. The Dryads and Mirari specialize in elemental magic, which is mostly damaging spells, but also includes things like strength and debilitation and air shield. The Jundar race specialize in star magic, which is powerful and has like a little bit of everything. And then there's also this dark necromancy magic that a lot of goblins and evil monsters use. Every character who can use magic has a school that they're allowed to use. For Brennan Godric, it's elemental magic. Alaron, however, could learn any spell that you try to teach him. And at this point, like they address it and sort of becomes clear why. We take the Amaranth to Ardra, and she's going to begin a ritual to expel the poison. And she mentions that a side effect of the ritual might be having visions. Alaron remembers the horrible vision that he had in Oriana's hut. He tells Ardra to stop, but it happens anyway, and they have like a collective vision of chaos creatures. And Ardra realizes that Alaron is being hunted by these dark forces, and then the doorman shows up in the vision, and he apologizes and he says he didn't think that Alaron was a threat, and he was wrong. And they also have a vision of like an old disfigured man in a rocking chair, which will become explained later. And Ardra finishes the vision, or finishes the ritual to cast out the poison, but it turns out that it doesn't work because you aren't actually poisoned anymore. The issue is that you just don't have a true name. The Dryad word wildling just describes someone without a true name. See, it turns out that in this world, everybody has a naming ceremony done when they're babies, which unites their body and their spirit. Without a name, the spirit wanders separate from the body. Alaron has been seeing a spirit wander around for a while, and it calls him Retorb, which is just brother backwards. That's Alaron's spirit. And he needs to merge with him or he'll die. That's the first problem. The second problem is that Wildling is sort of an open door for evil forces from the plane of chaos. And there's this prophecy that there'll be someone with no name that chaos will come for, and they'll come flooding in with an army and bring about the end of the world. So if Alaron doesn't become named, he'll cause the world's destruction. And also, it'll drive him insane. You learn later that the dude in the rocking chair from the vision was called Mago, and that he was another wildling, and he like resides in Terminor now. But he went insane and nuked a town and killed everyone, and he burned himself out. But we won't visit Mago and find out any of this. But that's who the man in the rocking chair was, and it's a risk that Aileron will go insane and lose control of his power, and all that will happen to him. So upon learning all this, Aileron says to Ardra, "You got to name me." But apparently, for someone as old as Aileron, it's not so simple. People are supposed to be named as babies, but for someone Aileron's age, Ardra says only the master namer Credog can do it. So there's four great wizards in the world. There's Bowden, who we met at Guernia. There's Ardra, who we're talking to, and then there's Credog and Shamsik. And Credog is the master of naming magic, and he's a recluse who lives on an island, and that's where we need to go. Before we leave the magic school, we're going to talk to one of the trainers who will train you. This guy teaches naming magic, and he wasn't available before. And we're going to use him to teach Aileron stupidity and to bring it to level 5. Aileron still needs his wizard skill at level 2 in order to learn stupidity. But we're bringing the spell to level 5, and we want to cast it at level 5, which means we need Aileron's wizard skill at level 5, on top of just the spell level. That's where the witch ring and the wizard hat are going to come into play, because he's at 2 plus 3 is going to boost his wizard skill to 5, so he can cast stupidity at level 5, which is strong enough to kill some of the enemies that we're going to encounter with 10 intelligence. In order to get to Namer's Isle, we have to head off to Port Said to get a boat. On the way, we're going to kill some Cyclops, and they can be stat killed with stupidity scrolls or from a cast by Aileron. They give a fair amount of XP, which we're going to use to pump Aileron's intelligence to make him hit the spell more reliably. And then we're going to avoid all the fights up to Port Said. There's a bridge on the way in, and the bridge is closed because we meet Arturo, and he's this dumb character who he wants to be a knight, but he's not the brightest crayon in the box, and Arturo's taken it upon himself to guard the bridge and let nobody through. And you can take it you take him into your party, but we don't, because it's basically him or Abrakan. And Abrakan's better. Like, Arturo's really tanky and he's stronger than Abrakan, but he has no dexterity, which means he never gets any turns to attack, which is sort of important. So we also see Keelan, and she's a scantily clad red-headed thief, and she tricks Arturo into letting her inside. So we're going to meet her at the inn, and we're going to have her join up. She starts with maximum dexterity, right? And on top of that, she has a wizard skill of 4 and a high thief skill of 8. She's basically better than Brenna in every way. And she's also an elemental caster, so she can learn debilitation, which can stat kill low strength enemies. Once we have Keelan, Brenna's redundant, so she'll just be performing in fights until we eventually kill her off. We also stay at the inn a few times. This is because Keelan's a lunar character, and we want her to be at her full power with a full moon at a specific time later. So our resting here is to advance the calendar and set things up. Rada is here as well. She's Aileron's magic tutor at the castle, and was a party member we could have taken. If we did take her, someone else would be here from the castle with the same message that she has. Let us know that the ritual that Ardra did to remove the poison, it failed because you weren't actually poisoned, obviously, but it sent like a magic shockwave out that everyone felt. So Bowden knows what happened, and a lot of other wizards will as well, and that sort of kicked off certain elements of the plot. We can't get a boat from Port Said because there's fog, and the lighthouse isn't lit. We have to go find the magic scroll that lights it. The scroll was dropped into the well and landed into the caves below. So we find the scroll, we have to and use it to go light the lighthouse. On the way, we're going to take a fight with Chaos Minions. We snuck by this fight on the way into Port Said, but we would have to sneak by it 3 more times. So just as soon take the fight. It's got a fair amount of XP, and it has a chance to drop some useful gear. And now we've got Keelan, so she can take advantage of this experience as well. We're also going to take some ogre fights. killing them with the stupidity spell. We're raising Keelan's strength as quickly as possible because we want her to be able to use Warfang. We also need her at 20 intelligence so she can use a wand later. And then we're going to need to teach her debilitation so she can use that on Chaos Island and later to kill Shamsik. Once we've hit the lighthouse, we'll come back to Port Said. But before we can book a boat, we're going to run into this jester who speaks in rhymes, and he says he knows Alaron, and he sort of gives fortune telling readings and crap. His rhyming is really awkward. At one point, he says, "Have you heard? I'm thinking of becoming a beard," and that makes no sense. And also, it doesn't rhyme. But the jester's name is Ferris, and he'll become important later. Mostly, right now, he's just a pain. But we're going to get on the boat to Port Said, and a few things happen. First, the boat's attacked by griffins, and griffins do a crap ton of damage, so they could absolutely wreck you. But in this particular fight, they don't move, right? So if we run up to them, they'll attack us, but we can just kill them with a bow and just move on. So the second thing is sort of funny because when Uraza gave Alaron the stick, Stormbreaker, she said that when he sails, he needs to attach it to his helm to avoid bad weather. And when Alaron's sailing to Namer's Isle, he tries to tie Stormbreaker to the helm of the ship. But unfortunately, he doesn't know like nautical terms. So he says, "Oh yeah, I tied it to the helm," and the captain goes, "That's the mast." And he goes, "Oh well, that seems like a small mistake. Like that couldn't possibly affect it." But he says that, and then they run into a massive storm, and they have to take shelter on this weird island, which is it turns out to be Chaos Isle. And the captain says, "Go explore," while he works on fixing the ship. Chaos Isle is full of dangerous enemies, but with a couple exceptions, they can all be stat killed. They're maulers that we're gonna avoid. Chaos warriors, troopers, and stormers all have low enough intelligence that they fall with stupidity, and chaos scouts have low enough strength that they'll die to debilitation level 4. Chaos sorcerers and spellweavers, though they're dangerous. When we take a couple fights that involve them, we're going to try and just kill them as quickly as possible. We'll take fights here. It's easy enough, and we're going to get strong XP for it. And taking the fights also allows us to completely skip any specific grind, which used to exist in the route. It used to be they would spend almost an hour killing ogres, and we're not going to do any of that. We're also going to grab the Wall of Bones wand here, which can be used to instantly immobilize an enemy. We need it to win a couple of fights that can't be stat killed. When we climb up the mountain, there's a bridge that you can step off of, and you'll wind up near a teleporter that takes you right next to this chest with the wand. We're going to do that, and then we're going to get into a fight, and we're going to flee, which is going to send us back to where we were before falling. That's the second time that we use the fleeing to backtrack, so to use it to save time. We can't leave the island until we've visited the inside of the massive dungeon at the top of the mountain, but we can just go in and out of the door, and that's enough. There's a lot of juicy experience and cool items in the dungeon, but we don't really need either. So once we've entered and exited the dungeon, we can leave the island. We head to Namer's Isle, and it turns out that the delay having to go to Chaos Isle was costly because we arrive just as minions of Chaos are ritually killing Cradog, and that's not awesome. So we have to fight with a Chaos Stormer, and a Warrior, and a Mauler, and a Sorcerer. The Stormer and the Warrior will fall to stupidity, but the Mauler and the Sorcerer are dangerous. We have to use Keelan using the Wall of Bones wand to take care of the Mauler, and that's why she needs her intelligence at 20. And we use strength potions to handle the Sorcerer. Sorcerer can cast Web of Starlight, which immediately immobilizes a character and causes them to take gradual damage. But you can break out of Web of Starlight if you have high strength. That's not true about Wall of Bones or Frozen Doom. The fight is dangerous, but I've really never had it end poorly. We kill the Chaos minions, but we still arrive too late to save Credog. He's dying, and he's unable to perform the naming rituals, so he's going to tell us to seek the help of the Jundar king Zaratas in the southern desert city of Ugarit before he dies. So we take his remains, and we're supposed to deliver them to Tollywalk for a funeral cutscene. But that's all optional, so we're just going to drag his corpse with us for the rest of the game. We return to the boat, we go back to Port Said, and we're going to head off to the next city of Terminor. Before we leave Port Said, we are going to make sure we take a moment to get Keelan at least one level of warrior if we haven't already. Because warrior skill, like when she has one level of it, that allows Warfang to give her +2 to it. So she does a lot more damage once she has that. On the way to Terminor, just outside of it, there's a fight with a group of trolls. And we're going to use that to get Brenna and Abrakan killed. They both have a lot to say in the upcoming cutscenes, and neither of them is really useful anymore. Trolls do a crap ton of damage, and they can be killed with stupidity, so the perfect opportunity to do this. We then continue to the Terminor gates. If you ask the guards if you can go in, they'll say no, but you can still just walk right in. They don't do their job very well. Terminor has a few plot things that we don't bother with. We're not going to visit Mago, but we do meet the innkeeper, Tamberlane. Ardra would have recommended that we talk to him if we went to bury Credog, but obviously we didn't. Tamberlane is really cool about one thing, though. He sells you boots of speed at a lower price than he buys them back from you. So we're going to do this. We're going to use this to quickly get like just a bunch of gold that we'll use to buy a couple rings of healing, which keep you topped up during the day through photosynthesis. We're also going to buy a few things in town that increase your dexterity. Some boots of speed, obviously the Tinker's gloves, and the bow of accuracy, which gives you +5 to your dex. And then we're going to enter the inn, and this cutscene begins. So a woman stumbles into the inn, and she says that she's from the town of Pome, where she just witnessed a massacre. Shamsuk apparently showed up with his undead army and laid waste to the town, killing everyone. The woman then dies in front of us. And we meet Neeson, who's our friend we could have met before but didn't. And he's been cursed by Shamsuk to slowly turn into a zombie. As far as anyone can tell, there's no cure. But Neeson is going to Shamsuk's tower to kill him, and we agree to come with. Neeson's a strong wizard with a fireball spell that does plenty of damage, and it would be a decent party member, like under reasonable circumstances, but because we're not taking any fights that we have to kill with damage, we kill him off pretty quickly, just to skip all of Neeson's cutscenes. Normally, he spends some time reflecting on his curse and whether he's doomed to die and what his life really meant. And then once we're in the tower, he triggers this cutscene where we encounter a Fire Lord that will absolutely destroy us. But Neeson heroically sacrifices himself to kill the Fire Lord. Alarin pleads with Neeson not to do it, but he insists that he's going to die from the curse anyway, and he doesn't want to become a zombie under Shamsuk's power. And he bemoans that he's like seen his friend Rada on her hands and knees gathering herbs, trying to cure him. It's like this touching scene, and obviously we don't have time for it, so we kill him off beforehand. And the Fire Lord that he's supposed to sacrifice himself to kill just doesn't show up. And there's a zombie encounter we can find on the way to Darkling Bog, and it gives us the Wizard's Wand, which we can equip for another +1 to Wizard. That's critical because our plan is to kill Shamsuk with Debilitation, and it needs to be at level 8, because Shamsuk's strength is at 15. Keelan's Wizard skill starts at rank 4, so with the Witch Ring and the Wizard Hat and the Wizard's Wand, we can bring her Wizard stat up to 8. Zombie encounter also gives us a fair amount of XP, and we can use it to dispatch Neeson as well by having him fireball the zombies along with himself. Once Neeson falls, the zombies can go down to stupidity, as do most undead. Wraiths are the undead that don't typically die to stupidity, but their strength is at 1, so they'll readily die to debilitation. Darkling Bog is vast and it's easy to get lost in when you don't know the way. There's a side area called Elishiva's Tomb, and it has some interesting, but it's mostly useless gear. And there's also an old like bog hermit who lives there who you can run into. We don't bother with any of that. We're just gonna head directly to Shamsuk's tower. It's guarded by two golems, two stone golems, which we just kill with stupidity. Before we enter, though, we may have to camp once or twice just to make sure that it's a full moon. So Keelan's at full power. This is what we were setting up earlier in Port Said when we stayed at the inn a few times. But if we didn't exactly nail it, we can sort of camp a couple times here. It's just slower to camp here because every time you camp, there's a cutscene. Once we're inside Shamsuk's tower, we're going to take a lot of fights because the majority of them can be stat killed. The skeletons, the golems, the zombies, the Minotaur Lord all go to stupidity, while Dust Devils and Wraiths fall to debilitation. All right, the Minotaur Lord guards a key with a Wall of Bones scroll. We need both of them, and there's only one fight that we take in the whole of the dungeon that we can't really insta win, and that's a White towards the end of the maze. White is one of the few undead that you can't stat kill. And he's a real pain because it casts Frozen Doom, which can immobilize us. So the way we handle him is we make sure that we have our dexterity maxed. We save right before it, and we just load the fight until we get a chance to go first and have Keelan use the Wall of Bones wand. Right, the success rate varies, but eventually the White goes down. He's like the true boss of the dungeon because the Shamsuk fight is actually pretty easy. We encounter Ferris, who explains that he's been Shamsuk's apprentice this whole time. He's cursed by Shamsuk, we believe, to speak in rhyming riddles rather than saying things directly. And he'll tell you that Shamsuk's not actually at the tower right now. He's in Orson Forest. He's interrogating Oriana, the healer that you met near the start of the game. So we take a teleporter to Orson to confront Shamsuk. Once through the teleporter, Alarin gets annoyed with Ferris's like rhyming shtick, and he unleashes some magic at him, which breaks the curse and makes Ferris speak plainly. Ferris explains that at his own suggestion, like at Ferris's suggestion, Shamsuk is interrogating Oriana about Alarin. Shamsuk knows that Alarin is the prophesied wildling who will bring about the end of the world by opening the world to chaos. So he's investigating this, and Ferris told him that Oriana knew something. So then you go to face Shamsuk, who has just killed Oriana. He says that Oriana's forgetful nature was annoying because she couldn't answer his questions, but he was determined to find out, and he figured out that she had screwed up Alarin's naming ceremony, which is why Alarin was never named. Oh, and here's a ton of bricks to hit you with. Oriana was Alarin's mother. Like, Alarin had grown up an orphan, never knowing his mother, and then he discovers that Oriana was his mother, and now she's dead. So he's furious. Shamsuk sort of dickishly offers to raise Oriana as a zombie if it bothers Alarin so much, which wasn't a helpful thing to say. So Shamsuk reveals why he's been doing all of this. His plan. He was aware that chaos was coming to this plane. He was aware of the prophecy. He knew that he was dealing with the end of the world, and he figured he'd need an army to save the world. So he was killing people to incorporate them into his undead army. So because he's a mastery of necromancy magic, and he's created this staff that controls undead. So he's been using it in hopes of creating an army that could defeat the army that chaos is going to bring. But then he learns that Alarin's destroyed his tower and killed all the undead monsters inside, and Shamsuk is horrified. but he says, "Well, we got to work together." He offers to teach Alarin to like master his power and avoid going insane, and the two of them can fight chaos together, right? And he argues with Ferris a little bit, saying like, how's he gonna get named now? Like Cradog is dead, nobody can name him, and he's like, well, I'll find a way, and Ferris he tortures Ferris magically, and just generally acts like a dick, and Alarin gets upset, and combat starts. So the fight includes Shamsuk, two wraiths, two giant skeletons, and a plague zombie, all of which can be stat killed. Shamsuk and the wraiths die to debilitation, at which point we can switch the wizard gear to Alaron so he can kill the remaining enemies with stupidity. Right. We used to equip Ferris with an amulet of pork that made him easy to kill with physical attacks. It gave him a minus 100% physical resistance. Unfortunately, it takes him too long to die. Having Ferris die skips a 90-second cutscene at the end of the fight, but it takes more than 90 seconds for Ferris to actually die. He's a tanky mofo, so um, we're just gonna have to sort of tough it out. The old method of having Alarin cast Wall of Bones on Shamsuk used to fail a lot of the time, but now that we're using debilitation, I haven't had any trouble winning this fight the first time. So in a cutscene after the fight, Ferris shows up with the Necromancer staff, and he says he's planning on using whatever remaining undead are as like a backup plan in case Alarin fails. So Alarin's furious, and he demands the staff, but Ferris uses it on him and then escapes with it. Right, so Alarin, unfortunately, doesn't have this powerful artifact. There's a lot of scenes coming up where Ferris will try to use the staff, and like where he'll interact with Alarin, and he wants it. And some of them are really funny, but we're gonna skip all of them because funny doesn't save time. Now that Shamsuk is dead, we go back to our previous plan, visiting the Jundar and asking for a name, or at least that's what the game expects us to do. We head south towards the desert. The path there has a few encounters to sneak past, one with a darkened bat that's particularly annoying. I had to work hard to find like a semi-consistent setup to let me run past this darkened bat, because otherwise it's like a really long sneak, and sneaking is just super slow here. So eventually we make it to the gate and asks us a riddle, and if you give us the wrong answer, it'll send elementals to kill us. But once you get through the gate, what's supposed to happen and what happens vary greatly. So the game wants you to cross the vast desert to find the Jundar city of Ugarit and visit the Jundar king Zeratus and ask him to name you. He'll tell you that he can't, so you'll threaten him, I assume because you've got no points in diplomat, and he'll tell you the great dragon Ruga has the power to name you anymore because you're too old to be named, etc. In a skipped cutscene with Ferris, you would have learned that there's a bit of history that the Jundar used to have humanity enslaved, and they had this great empire that spanned the continent, and that the great dragon Ruga was with them, following the sound of great horn of Kainon. Zeratus will tell you that you need the horn in order to face the dragon without being killed. The horn is buried in a barrow. Zeratus will give directions, and I assume because we have no diplomat points, he'll tell us to avoid this place called Maxon. Maxon is an area sort of on the way, and it contains the ghost of Loden. He's a long dead human king who slew the evil Jundar king of Lugash and freed humanity. Lugash is now the undead guardian of the Horn of Kainon, which we need. And he's the only his only vulnerability is apparently Loden's sword, which we're supposed to get off of Loden's ghost at Maxon. So we're supposed to go there, and then we're supposed to go to the barrow and get the horn, and then travel back to Ugarit, show the horn to Zeratus, where he'll tell us that Ruga resides all the way back in Araman, So at that point, we'll cross the desert again to get back to the gate and head to Araman. But all of that is really slow. What we really need to do is just get the horn. And Lugash, though he's only vulnerable in damage to the Loden sword, he doesn't have very high strength, so he goes down to debilitation. So the barrow is actually very near the Dundar gate to get in the desert. So rather than cross the desert a bunch of times to go back and forth and go talk to Xeratus and go to the Ugarit, we're gonna skip Ugarit completely. Just skip the whole town altogether and head straight to the barrow. The Horn of Kainon is in the barrow behind a locked gate that can only become unlocked when you kill Lugash, and summoning Lugash requires 7 artifacts. And these 7 artifacts are guarded by 7 undead wights. So we have to activate their sigils on the outside of the barrow, and then go down to the corresponding coffins and open them to trigger a cutscene with the wight, and then combat. And Alrund's pretty snarky with these wights. It's a little funny. The fights are actually pretty easy. Typically, Keelan will one-shot them from behind, but sometimes it'll take her as many as 2 hits. With her high dexterity, they often don't even get a single turn. Anyway, they all give some amazing gear, but unfortunately, you don't get to keep any of the gear. You have to give it immediately back. There's a known glitch that would allow you to keep the ring, the Mage Drake ring, but it's not worth the time to make it work. But once you've deposited all 7 bits of gear, Lugash will show up in the area below, and he'll comment that you can't kill him with the equipment that you have, which is sort of a hint that you need to get Loden's sword. But he actually falls instantly to debilitation, so joke's on him. You pick up the Horn of Kainon and you head to leave. On the way out of the desert, you can find your spirit. The spirit's been showing up several times in the past, insisting that you merge with it. You can always try, and it'll start like a combat encounter where once you get within a certain range of it, it'll say that you're caught in its vortex. At that point, your movement lowers as if you were engaged in melee combat, and you take damage each turn, which can get pretty massive, right? And the way these encounters end is you keep pushing forward, and once Alarin gets really close to the spirit's supposed to try to merge, but it will always fade away. But now that you have the Horde of Kainon, you can actually succeed in merging with your spirit, so we're going to do that. It's necessary to do that to finish the game. And doing so grants 200,000 experience points. And it brings your wizard skill to 10, and it adds +3 to all of your stats except for dexterity. Um, so we're going to use this experience points to max the Wall of Bone spell, which we'll use to kill the end boss. And so it's necessary in order to expend the 200k experience we just got to take at least one fight on the way back to Araman. The choice to make you go back to Araman feels like a stupid game lengthening ploy, right? But we don't take the standard path back because that would take forever. Instead, we use 2 portals. The one in Darkling Bog goes to Orson Forest, which is where we fought Shamsuk. From there, we go to Guernia, where a portal in the basement leads back to the Airman portal that we activated so much earlier before we left there. It's still a long trek back, but it is much shorter than it would be walking the whole way. So in Araman, outside the Dragon's Lair, we run into Uraza again, and she expresses concern in helping Alarin because he might at any time go insane and kill everyone. But she talks to him and agrees to trust him and let him into the Dragon's Chamber. Yeah, you have to sneak past the Fire Lord at other encounters to get to the dragon. And the dragon will name you in a cutscene that we're going to skip at the start button. But in that cutscene, it's interesting because he'll tell you your true name, which will be whatever your character was already named. So if your character's named Alaron, then the dragon will name you Alaron. You know, Incidentally, that means that the wizard school, when you said your name was Alaran and the doorman called you a liar, the doorman didn't know what he was talking about. Actually, it doesn't really make sense in the game that your true name is your regular name. Like, there's reasons that it's not logical, but whatever. You're finally named, and the quest is complete. And the dragon promptly flies off and dies. So when you first went into the lair, you'd hear him moaning in agony, and apparently his connection to the world was already fading. Dealing with this dragon was a bit of an issue already, and I guess the naming ceremony took all of his remaining strength. So when you leave the dragon's lair, Uraza confesses that she used some magic on you to prevent you from leaving if you didn't succeed in getting your true name. So, they were worried that you might come out, fail and come out and kill everyone, and she was like, no, I have that plan, don't worry. She also tells you that while you were in the dragon's lair, forces of chaos sort of attacked Guernia before the path to the world could be closed. So there's a battle at Guernia, which is now swarming with chaos minions. So you resolve to go there and save everyone. We jump in the portal and we avoid all the chaos minions that are swarming the castle and the town and all that. And we just head straight for the battlements, which is where the king is battling some fierce enemies. So you run into Prince Sheridan, who confesses that he conspired with the forces of chaos somehow to allow them entry into the castle. And he did this sort of out of left field because he was always jealous of Alaran. Like when they were training together, Alaran would be better than him. And apparently Sheridan had discovered that the reason King Phelan had allowed Alaran to live in the castle was, and the reason that he'd take him under his wing was because Phelan was Alaran's father. Phelan apparently had a love affair with Oriana, and was apparently planning on naming Alaran his heir over Sheridan. At least that's what Sheridan says. So you have a combat with Sheridan, who has sold out the entire world because he's angry over what's apparently sibling rivalry, and Sheridan can wreck you, but you have Wall of Bones, and Wall of Bones will instantly immobilize him when it hits. So at this point, you're supposed to have Loden's Sword, which is pretty much the only way to do better than single-digit damage to all the bosses, since you were supposed to find it. But Wall of Bones is going to work. Anyway, after you kill Sheridan, you've no chance to save. It immediately initiates a cutscene where you face Pachangarat, who's the demon queen from your first vision way back in Oriana's hut. Pachangarat laments that you ruined yourself by taking a name, and now you're useless and you have to be destroyed. So a fight starts, and if Pachangarat gets his turn, she'll start by casting Mirror on herself, which makes her immune to the hostile spells for the duration. Right? So that's an immediate reset, unfortunately, which means we have to see Sheridan's speech again, and then we have to fight Sheridan, mash through all the cutscenes again. Right? The only way we can kill Pachangarat is with Wall of Bones, which is why we give Alaran all the gear to increase his dexterity. We have to go first and cast a spell to kill her. And once Pachangarat falls, you'll find King Phelan, who's missing a leg, and he's dying, and he confesses that his love affair, he had this love affair with Oriana, and that he's Alaran's father, and he says Alaran will be king when he's dead, and then he dies. And the game ends with a coronation ceremony for Alaran.